Satnam, greetings everyone. What's going on? Always good to be reconnecting with you for this edition of March's Vedic Astrology Happenings and Forecast. Hope you're staying warm wherever you are. It's a winter wonderland out here in snowy Northern California. Um, so for today's session, actually for this month's session, I'm going to break it up into two parts. There's a lot happening and just felt like it would be more digestible and also condensed to do it that way. So this is part one, and part two will be separate from this. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And if you haven't checked out last month's episode, always a good idea just to kind of get familiarized with what's happening. But this is the snapshot of the beginning of the month. And the biggest things happening right now that are really continuations from February is that we have the sun in the constellation of Aquarius, where it is conjunct with both Saturn and Mercury. And I would encourage individuals to be working with this solar energy just because this is a bit of a difficult position for the sun, and it's a time to really be working with cultivating one's own sense of self, identity, relationship with the divine, God, consciousness, even one's father biologically, perhaps. Um, it's a time for working with prana. The sun is connected to prana, and the sun is oftentimes connected both to disease as well as the ability to resist disease. And Saturn is the primary planet of disease, and not just of a physical nature, but especially being an Aquarius, an air sign of a more neurological and psychological nature. So, good time just to be really strengthening one's both physical, mental, emotional well-being, things that are invigorating, active, but also sattvic in nature, that's uplifting to the consciousness. So while that's going on, we also have Venus right now in the constellation of Pisces with Jupiter, which is, I think, a beautiful combination. And Venus is going to continue to be getting stronger in the next about 12 days before it moves into Aries. So just again, a good time to really be cultivating love, cultivating devotion, cultivating creativity, being sweet, not indulgent, not too indulgent, but a healthy amount of sweetness and nourishment and love, really, at the end of the day. A few other things happening. Mars is in Taurus. The moon is in Gemini. We'll talk more about Mars, especially later in this month. So first thing that's on the docket is we got a full moon coming up March 7th, and this full moon is going to be taking place in the constellation of Leo, and Leo is ruled by the sun. So again, there's this really, I think wonderful window that we have in this first part of March, to be in right relationship with ourself, first and foremost. And the moon represents our emotions. So our right relationship with self from sort of an ego, identity, soul perspective, which is more the sun. And also our emotional nature, which is very tied into all the Venus and Jupiterian energy in Pisces. So I think this is going to be a spicy full moon personally. It's happening in Leo, which is a fire sign. The sun is very fiery, obviously, in nature. And we have a very, very, very strong influence as well of Saturn, which we talked about. Saturn is a little bit of a difficult planet. Its nature is more malefic, and the sun and Saturn do not get along too well. So this is an interesting kind of Aquarius Leo standoff between the Saturn and sun. Mars is also very involved in this full moon, kicking in its energy from Taurus. So we've got this a lot of fire with the sun and Mars, but also a lot of air with Saturn and also Mercury. So these are the elements to be aware of, right? Fire, air, how do you channel that? How do you balance that? Grounding, containment, nourishment, but also utilizing those energies. They're beautiful when, they're focused in the right way, again, for more higher expressions of prana and illumination, expression, creativity, writing, especially. So it's just what's happening. I just think it's gonna be a lot of energy, and see what we'll see what happens. Buckle up. Could be a bumpy ride. Then March 12th, we have a transit that is very important. Venus is going to be moving out of Pisces, where it will have been for about a month, into Aries. And this is a very interesting position because Saturn is affecting it and will be affecting it from about March 12th till about the middle of April. And it's also now in a very interesting relationship with what we call the lunar nodes, Rahu, which is Ra, and Ketu, which is Ke. So these are very important from a karmic perspective. And um, especially with Venus being in Aries, which is a fire sign, very willpower, third chakra, and it's having a relationship with both Rahu and Saturn, which are they're kind of dangerous from an excess of air. And so again, this fire air theme is very prevalent for a lot of this month. But it's a very heightened position for sensuality, for sense pleasures in particular. Um, and so just again being aware of that, no good, no bad, no judgment. It is what it is. But just notice that the tendencies, especially at more of a subconscious level, that come up around things of a pleasureful type nature, and again finding a healthy moderation, because that's kind of the energies. It's it's such that moderation is really what's being called for with the discipline of Saturn, um, to be more transcendent of one's senses, but also Venus's enjoyment of the senses and beauty and art and refinement. Um, so again, it's just, bringing consciousness, but Rahu can make things a little dicey from a mental psychological perspective, where we can kind of have some distorted perceptions, and that's where we get into trouble. This should be kind of a cool day because the moon and Venus are having a really strong relationship with these nodes. Venus rules Libra, where the moon is. So that's kind of a nice. There's a niceness about this combination on this day in particular, and then it'll change once the moon moves. And then on the 13th and 14th, this is what's interesting to me moving forward from the 12th, especially over the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, is we're going to see transits of Venus changing signs, Mars changing signs, the sun is going to be changing signs, and Mercury's changing signs. So within 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, within 5 days, we see 4 planets that are going to transit signs. And these are the inner planets, right? Jupiter, Saturn are the outer planets. The lunar nodes, Rahu, Ketu, are considered to be kind of more distant energetics. But Mercury, Venus, the sun, Mars, and the moon are really more the inner planets of kind of our personality. So this could, I think this is going to bring up a lot personally. And I won't get into too much of the details here, but Mars will be moving out of Taurus into Gemini on these days. The moon will be in a little bit of a challenging position on these days. So just something to be aware of, again, especially on the 12th, 13th, and 14th with this Venus Mars kind of combination, the moon's challenge position. It's a lot of energy, especially around the kind of second, third, fourth chakras in particular, even a little bit of the first. So kind of more what we would say the lower triangle, honestly, on these days, where the prana has the tendency to be more tamasic, and flow into things that maybe are a little bit more heavy. Gross would be the word that I would like to use, I guess. And then we'll talk more about what happens on the 15th and the 16th with Mars, or with the sun and Mercury. But this is a snapshot for the first 2 weeks of the month. And again, as always, staying connected to your sadhana, your meditation practices, whatever devotions work for you, always to me the most important. But if you can't get out and spend some time in the sun, I think spending time in the sun, spending time under the sky of these planets as well, at night or in the early morning is just so sattvic and so beautiful to be in a nice relationship, especially as we move towards the spring equinox that we're going to talk about happening in the second part of this month. So I will pause there for now. See you perhaps on the next one. Satnam.